Hello everyone, this is part 13 of What If Naruto Left But Hinata Is Confused, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Naruto stirred lightly in his sleep and then was still. Suddenly, he popped up in his bed and looked around the tiny apartment. It was completely dark. Naruto could barely see his own hand in front of his face. He cursed as he clambered out of bed and peeked through the blinds. The stars were already out and he could see dark clouds threatening to take over the sky. Naruto quickly ran to his refrigerator and grabbed a single flower, threw on his black hooded sweatshirt and dashed out the door. He didn't even bother checking the Great Hyuga household as he took the familiar path down to the graveyard. As he ran through the tree tops, he could see the two stars in the sky, their brightness blurred by his quick movements. A slight pain held his heart, as he thought about his date with Sakura. The stars had cried then too. Then he saw it, the faint image of paled-faced girl in the sky, the one he was always looking for, but couldn't find. Anger quickly welled up inside of him, as the tears rolled down his cheeks and he gnashed his teeth together. He didn't deserve her, not after what he'd done. Naruto sped up, as the clouds overtook the last bit of clear sky and the crying stars were gone. He stopped running until he reached the same huge oak tree he always perched on when he visited Kiba. It didn't take his eyes long to search out the small girl he had been looking for. Her head was laying toward Kiba's grave marker on top of a white furry object. Naruto's heart fluttered within his chest at the sight of the dark-haired angel below him, but the feeling was quickly replaced by the all-too-familiar sobbing pain he had come to know intimately over the last few months. Naruto watched as Hinata moved her hand to her locket and opened it, bending her end down so she could see. Quietly she lay in the dark, just staring intently at the insides of the silver heart. What did she carry around inside that thing? He wondered as he strained his eyes to see. The tears voluntarily rolled down Hinata's face as she stared at the two pictures in front of her. Kiba, she whispered finally, as she stared at the tiny picture of the dark boy's features. You had been the one to give me the strength I needed that day. I thought it was Naruto, but it was you and I couldn't protect you. She sobbed as she pulled her knees into her chest. USD because of me, because I made you vow to protect him with your life and I never got to tell you, you never knew how much I appreciated everything you did for me, how you were always there for me. USD never knowing that I loved you too. Naruto's heart stopped at her words, and a fresh batch of tears came to eyes as he watched the tiny, battered girl before him collapse to the ground, clutching a Kamaru and the orange sweater to her broken soul, as the cloudy sky began to shed cry. Naruto stayed and watched over the fragile girl, as the tiny sprinkles hit his head, one after the other. He twirled the pink flower in his hands, as he debated with his inner voice. He wanted to go, he needed to go, but he couldn't bring himself to give her the flower and leave. Still, he couldn't do any more than Shino could for her. All he could do was make sure she was okay and shouldn't even be allowed to do that. The rain lightly fell over the village, as Naruto maintained his vigilant watch over Hinata. Although he felt he couldn't and shouldn't take care of her, he felt reluctant to tear himself away from the sleeping girl, as she shivered in her sleep. Finally, Naruto decided he had stayed and watched over her long enough. It had been hours since he had left his apartment, and he needed to return, before someone discovered him, or she woke up. Softly, Naruto jumped to the ground and made his way over to Hinata. Gently, he placed the flower in her palm, just as he had the night before, and turned to leave. Suddenly, the sky opened up, allowing the rain to come down harder and faster. Naruto's clothes were soaked through in a matter of minutes, as he hesitated in place. Hinata shivered in the rain, causing Naruto to look down at her frail form once more. The water slowly slid down her face, tracing the curve of her cheek and the lines of her mouth. He could see her whole body shaking from the cold and he forced himself to look away. What was he doing? What was he thinking? He couldn't help her, he didn't know how. He had killed her best friend, he didn't deserve to do anything for her, he was a beast, a monster. If he allowed her to get too close, who knows what he might do. She is better of where she is, Naruto thought as he began walking away, his teeth tightening in pain. Then, through wind and the pouring rain, he heard hit. A weak and pitiful cry. Help me. Naruto froze where he was and listened carefully for the voice again, but there was only the sound of the rain. He shook his head, disgusted with himself as he looked back at Hinata, shivering in the rain as she lay on the hard ground. I can't help her, he thought as he made himself move forward once more. Then he heard the voice again, louder this time and trembling uncontrollably. Naruto, please help me. Naruto ground his teeth together as he stared back down at the unconscious girl. She was sleeping. How did she know he was here? The rain ran through his hair, over his face and down his like a river forging a path through the mountains. Damn Yoshino, he growled as he marched back through the mud. Gently he scooped the frozen girl into his arms, and pulled her protectively into his chest. Akamaru gathered himself sleepily off the ground after them. Naruto, Hinata whispered as he felt her grab a hold of his sweater and snuggle closer into his chest. Yes, was all he managed as he carried through the graveyard, toward the empty, wet streets of Konoha. Naruto, I feel so numb. Please, take me home. She pleaded. Okay, he choked, as his teeth tightened with guilt. He had told himself he wouldn't get involved. What was he doing? Not to my father's, Naruto. I want to go home with you. I want you to make the numbness disappear. I want you to make me feel again. She whimpered softly. Naruto's heart stopped for a moment, sending shockwave of yearning and guilt throughout his body. He knew if he took her back to her house, she would just end up back with Kiba. She would never leave his side and would probably from the cold. He couldn't deny that he wanted her to be with him, that he had an unexplainable urge to want to take care of her, to make her happy, but he didn't know how. He'd never had a family and he'd taken something so precious to her. How would she ever get over that? Would she be able to get over it? Naruto reluctantly opened his mouth in response. Okay, was all he could say to her, to the poor girl in his arms who had just lost her entire world. Hinata huddled closer to his chest and desperately wrapped her arms around him as he made his way back to the apartment, through the howling wind and powerful rainstorm. When he reached the small building, he quickly unlocked the door and slipped inside, waiting for Akamaru before closing and locking the door behind him. Naruto continued to proceed to his bed. He could feel Hinata's peak frame shaking violently against his body. Carefully he laid her down and covered her with a dry comforter. Then he wandered over to his dresser and proceeded to throw off his soaked clothes, replacing only his boxes and pants, as Akamaru promptly shook the water from his fur and jumped into the bed with Hinata. After he had finished changing, Naruto went into the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of sake and a fresh shot glass and resumed his favorite position on the kitchen chair. As he leaned back and down shot after shot, his penetrating blue eyes never leaving the tiny girl curled up in his bed. What had he done? Hinata's eyes fluttered softly as something soft gently nudged her awake. Akamaru. She smiled sleepily as she searched blindly for his head and gently began stroking his ears. The birds were singing outside. She knew it was a new day, but all she could feel was the nothingness that had come to overtake her heart over the last few days. Hinata tried to shut her eyes extra tight, but eventually gave up on trying to go back to sleep. She mechanically yawned and stretched her arms across the bed. As her hand came down into the soft blankets, she heard a small crinkly sound and felt something smooth under her arm. Hinata opened her sleepy eyes, and sat up as she grabbed for the paper. She allowed her eyes to adjust to the light, letting the blurriness to fade away, then she looked at the paper that had been laying in bed with her. Her eyes went wide, as she saw the hasty scribbles of Naruto's unrefined hand. Hinata, went out to grab some things I thought you'd need. I won't be back until late. Till then, please stay inside and make sure all the door and the windows are locked. Make yourself at home. Sincerely, Naruto. P.S. You are welcome to the shower and anything you need until I get back. There are clean towels in the bathroom and you are welcome to anything in my dresser. Hinata put the letter down and sent the small room she was in. Naruto's apartment wasn't very big. It was basically one giant room with a measly refrigerator, sink and stove located near the front door, along with 3 small cupboards. He had crammed a circular wood table into the tiny space along with 4 chairs. The bed was located against the wall in the middle of the place and the dresser sat across from it. The only other true room was all the way on the other end of the apartment. There was a tiny door, which led into the small bathroom that seemed to have been attached to the place as a second thought. Hinata sighed as she noted the old dishes in the sink, the broken sake bottle on the floor and the pile of dirty clothes clinging against the corner of the dresser and the wall. Hinata looked away from the wreck that was Naruto's apartment and turned to the shower. Normally she would have cleaned instead, but things weren't normal anymore, she thought as she forced herself from the bed and walked toward the bathroom like a zombie. Slowly she discarded her dirty clothes and turned the shower on. She checked the water before getting in, and then she crouched against the wall. Her shoulders huddled over her knees as the water ran down her end skin with the silver locket in her hand. Eventually, Hinata managed to shampoo and condition her long black hair, her hand stopping right before putting the bottle down. Hinata closed her eyes and inhaled the familiar scent escaping through the top of the bottle. Suddenly, a small, but familiar feeling briefly ran through her heart, as it fluttered lightly in place, then just as quickly as it had come, the feeling faded into the numbness Hinata had come to know so intimately. After washing the rest of her body, Hinata exited the shower and dried off with one of the black towels piled up on the counter. Then she wandered back into the main room of the apartment and rummaged through Naruto's clothes. She found an old pair of black shorts that were slightly too big for her and an old gray shirt with the spiral symbol that the blonde boy was so fond of. As Hinata finished putting on the loosely fitted shirt, she caught a familiar scent, and a temporary warmth emanated throughout her body once more, and disappeared again, too soon. Hinata combed her long black hair out with one of Naruto's many combs, and continued to wrap her wet locks into a loose bun on the top of her head. Then she headed back over to Akamaru, who was still laying in a ball on the bed, and wrapped her arms warmly around him, as she took back her spot next to him on the bed. Hinata petted her friend absent-mindedly as she felt herself starting to drown in the darkness that had consumed her the night before, but before she slipped back, her thoughts wandered to Naruto and his sunny blonde hair, and a small smile crossed her face. Perhaps there is still hope, she whispered in his furry ear, her head sinking back down to the bed as her thoughts quickly turned to Kiba and that day. Hinata pulled her legs into her, like a ball, and eventually fell into another dark and unfit sleep, waiting for Naruto to return. Hinata woke up to find the sun had gone down and the moon had come up and Akamaru had left the bed some time ago. She shifted in the bed, as she rolled onto her back and stared up at the dark ceiling. I see you've finally woken up. Hinata's black hair whipped around her face as she turned to her head and her eyes went wide at what she saw. Akamaru was laying at the feet of Naruto, who was lounging in the kitchen chair without a shirt, a shot glass glued to his hand. His blonde hair was tangled and unkempt and his blue eyes were lined with heavy black lines, while his cheeks were gaunt and pale. Naruto's once tanned and chiseled chest was bony and small. His lifeless blue eyes looking at her, but not seeing her. Naruto, she gasped in surprise. He lazily nodded his head in response as he took a swig from the bottle on the table, completely foregoing the glass in his hand. Hinata couldn't accept that this emaciated shadow was really her blonde shinobi, her Naruto. What happened to you? She asked, ineffectually trying to keep the tears from her voice. Nothing. He scowled at her, as he took another drink. Don't ask again. But I told you not to ask again. Naruto growled as he slammed the bottle back down to the table. Hinata jumped back in the bed and felt a cold shiver climb up her spine. Immediately, Naruto's eyes filled with regret and massaged his forehead as he leaned against the table with his elbow for support. I'm sorry, Hinata, I shouldn't have blown up at you like that. It's not your fault Well, it's just not your fault. His voice drifted off as he finished the last part and he closed his eyes as if he were deep in thought. When he opened them again, he looked at Hinata, almost as if he had set his eyes on her for the first time. Her long hair had fallen out of the loose bun she had it in while she slept, and her eyes were a light shade of red and slightly swollen, only enhancing the lavender hues within her eyes and causing them to stand out more between her long ebony hair and pale skin. She was so perfect, just sitting there staring at him wide-eyed, with those perfect, angelic eyes of hers. It was almost as if she was staring directly at the demon trapped within him. Since you are going to be staying here for an indefinite period of time, there are some things we need to get straight before anyone gets too comfortable. Naruto stated uncomfortably under Hinata's unrelenting gaze. First of all, I need to know if anyone is going to come looking for you here. I don't need to know the details of why or how you left, I just need to know if the Hyuga clan is going to be coming after my ass for hoarding their heir in my home. Hinata cast her eyes down to the floor before answering Naruto's question. I think that Neji may know where I am, but I don't believe anyone else will come looking for me, at least not for a while anyway, and Neji, well, he just wants to make sure I'm safe, nothing more nothing less. Hinata answered sadly. Naruto's mind flashed to the footprint in the tree the morning he was spying on her and Sakura. He thought it had been Shino's footprint, could he have been wrong? I see, well then, you probably already know this, but I'll tell you just to be safe. The door, windows and shades are to be locked and secure at all times, and we don't answer the door for anyone. It's easier if people don't think I'm even here at the moment. Also, you are not to open the refrigerator. I'll be here most of the time, so I will be the one to make us both meals. As for that, I don't think we really need to talk about anything else. Oh, I placed your clothes in the top drawer of my dresser. As for that, you can stay here for as long as it takes you to heal. Why can't I open the fridge? I mean, I could cook too. I said no, stay out of it. Hinata flinched at his tone and decided to drop the subject as she settled back into the bed and Naruto threw back another drink. They continued on just like this, Naruto drinking himself half to death, while Hinata slept most of her day away, both too damaged to be of any use to the other. Hinata had even noticed the flowers she had received every night before she came here had stopped, and Naruto's drinking became worse. Her heart ached to see him this way, and she didn't know how to help him. He refused to talk to her, in fact he barely even looked at her, but sometimes, when he thought she was sleeping, he would come and sit beside the bed and take her hand in his. On the nights he was hurting the most, he would speak to her, apologizing profusely for what he'd done, and for not being able to fix it, but when she was awake, he would go back to being the same distant man she'd come to know over the past few weeks. Gradually, Hinata could feel a new feeling taking over the numbness she had held inside. She could feel the new feeling boiling up within her every time she looked at Naruto and whenever he put up that wall. She found his behavior frustrating and irritating. They couldn't go on like this forever. Then, when he was sitting at the table, drinking another bottle sake, Hinata finally broke her angry silence. You know, can't keep doing that to yourself, she told him pointedly, her normally soft and caring eyes, hard and unforgiving. Yeah, well you don't know what I've done, if you did you hate me too. He shot back as he waved the bottle through the air in order to emphasize his point. Hinata immediately backed down and stared at her own two hands as Naruto's words sunk in. This was all her fault, it was her fault that Kiba was S and it was her fault that Naruto hated himself, and now she was watching himself drink himself to death, she couldn't lose him too. She had to push aside her own selfish feelings, she needed to help him. They sat there in silence for some time as Hinata street USD her long-time love trying to decide how to approach him. Finally she opened her mouth. You know, Sakura has been worried about. She whispered lightly. She told me she's tried coming by to check on you, but you won't open the door, even for her. Naruto shifted uncomfortably in the chair and averted his eyes. Yeah, so, she wouldn't want to see me either, not after what I did. Hinata bit her lip, this wasn't the response she had expected. You know, Sakura really cares about you, Naruto. When I spoke to her the other day, there was a fear and sadness in her eyes I had never seen before when I mentioned your name. You're hurting her with your silence. What do you know? Naruto roared at her, as he leaned over in his chair and ran his fingers wildly through his hair. I loved her for years and now she wants help me. Now she's worried about me. I was so excited when she finally agreed to go with me on that date, and it was like she didn't even care. The moment he even showed up again, she was gone, she didn't care how I felt then, she wasn't worried about me then and I risked my N for her, like a fing idiot. What is wrong with you? That's not the Naruto I know. Hinata yelled back, surprising both Naruto and herself. The Naruto I know would never hurt his friends, and he would do anything to help them, to protect them, to give them strength. So what if Sakura loved Sasuke and she left you that night? That doesn't make the love she has for you any less real. For years I never understood her, and I even resented her, but now, finally, I think I understand how Sakura feels. What it's like to be torn between two people you feel such a connection to. I can't blame her now for not understanding how to handle it. Naruto stared at the fuming young woman on his bed. Who was this girl? She wasn't the same timid, shy Hinata he'd come to know and cherish. Her anger demanded his attention and her small frame seemed more dominating as her movements became more and more feisty with every word she spoke. He had never seen Hinata like this, and for the first time he felt something other than hate, mixed with regret, or the mind-numbing effects of alcohol. There was a small warmth in his heart and a desire he hadn't known before. Naruto pushed the chair back with his foot as he made his way over to the defiant young woman sitting in his bed, his gray shirt hanging slightly off her shoulder, exposing her bare skin. He paused next to the bed and stared down into her hard, lavender eyes, looking for any trace of insecurity she may have. The only thing he found was a deep-rooted challenge and strength in her eyes she had never exhibited before. It was almost as if they were saying, "This is me, this is who I truly am." Naruto allowed his eyes to drop from her eyes, tracing the lines of her cheeks, the point of her nose and the fullness of her lips. His mind wandered back to the day he first noticed Hinata's strong and subtle beauty. He remembered wondering how he had never noticed her before, and today was no different as his eyes wandered over her dainty chin and down her long and inviting N. He felt the hunger inside of him start to grow as he proceeded to let his eyes wander farther down. He stopped when he came to the same silver N lace she had been wearing that day. He remembered how the silver heart decorated her bare chest, and how the pink dress sat low, almost as thought to give it full rein. When he left Hinata that night, there was a look in Kiba's face that he'd never forget, and Hinata seemed nervous, almost guilty when he had found the two together. Then, in the graveyard, she stared into that locket for hours. She never took it off and he had caught her unconsciously grabbing for it more than once over the last few days. You loved him, didn't you? His voice was barely above a whisper and he closed his eyes, afraid of her answer. Hinata didn't hesitate, not wanting to lose the fire that had flared up inside of her. Yes, I love him. She told him, almost as if it were a dare. Naruto inhaled deeply, as if he were drowning and couldn't get enough air. His insides swirled in a chaotic torrent of regret, jealousy and yearning, as he tried to clear his mind. She loved you first, was the first thought to drift through his shattered mind. Was it true? Could she really have loved him? This unexplored labyrinth of emotion and mystery. Even he had to admit, he knew what it was like feel your insides tear each other to pieces over two different people. Had she experienced that same pain? Still, even if she had, she would hate him, and despise him for what he'd done. If that's true, then I'm the last person you should want near you. He growled in a low voice. Why is that? Hinata demanded, watching the muscles in Naruto's arms tighten and the way his end torso moved when he lifted his hand to run his fingers through his matted hair once again. You think I should hate you because you did it, don't you? She leveled. But what you don't understand is, if I abandoned you now, it would be like turning my back on him. I could never live with myself if I did that, if I had made him as himself for no reason. Why do say that like it's your fault? I was the one who did it. I'm the one you should blame. I can't blame you. Hinata dropped her head in shame, causing her black hair to doctor across her face like a shade. Naruto could feel the rage welling up inside him at the sight of Hinata blaming herself. Suddenly she felt a pair strong, forceful hands around her shoulders. I kid him Hinata, you should hate me. He yelled at the small girl. Hinata lifted her head, so she could look him in the eye, as she defiantly shook her head. Frustrated, Naruto picked her peak frame off the bed as he pushed her against the wall behind his headboard, his knees sinking into the mattress. Hate me. He cried louder, Hinata's eyes steeled as she allowed him to control her body like a puppet on a string. No, she whispered. Why won't you hate me? Naruto growled, his face inches from Hinata's and his torso encased by her long pale legs. Because I still love you too. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.